Have you ever felt that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who hurt you the most? My childhood was filled with fights, insults, and emotional neglect, and for years, I believed it was normal. My dad, who already had a short temper, was constantly fueled by my mother's insults. Pauper. Bad temper. Your entire family has bad temper. Daily fights were the norm. They'd quarrel at night, then go to sleep ignoring each other. I'd lie in my bed listening to that silence that somehow felt worse than the screaming. Here's where the emotional manipulation really messed with my head. After hurling those insults, she would apologize. I was angry. I didn't mean it. It was just the heat of the moment. But the very next day, the same words would come back. It was a cycle: insult, apology, repeat. Even my dad told her, "Lady, stop your acts." No point hurling insults and apologizing afterwards. Central to these insults was her repetitive money grievances. She hated doing housework despite being a full-time housewife and kept lamenting, "We are poor. We cannot afford to get a helper. We cannot afford to have 2 kids. We cannot afford to buy this or that because your dad earns too little." She always found opportunities to put him down, complaining that house chores were too much, even though I was an only child and my dad was the sole breadwinner. Remember, this was the 1990s, when it was still common in Asian culture for the husband to work and the wife to stay home. But what did penniless actually mean to her? To her, being poor meant she couldn't hire a helper and relax at home. My dad was a neat freak with systems for organization, but instead of learning to communicate with him or improve her skills, she chose a different path entirely, one that would turn our private family struggles into a public spectacle. What made this cycle even more destructive was that my mother wasn't fighting this battle alone. She had enlisted outside help in the form of her beloved sister, her shadow consultant who turned every family disagreement into a strategic warfare session. My mother never failed to update her sister about everything going on with our family, and I mean everything. Every single comment my dad made about his workplace, every suggestion he offered about housework improvement, even conversations between me and her. Nothing was private. Her convenient excuse was that she was poorly educated compared to my dad, so she needed to ensure she was getting the correct information. But this perspective was deeply disdainful to my father. He viewed it as a fundamental form of mistrust in their marriage. Her sister didn't step back and say, "This is within your family. I can't decide as an outsider." Instead, she positioned herself as protecting her dear sister from this family that was constantly bullying her, a narrative built entirely on my mother's constant complaints and victim-minded storytelling. My childhood home was never once a sanctuary. Instead, it became a source of internal quarrels and external conflicts, where tabloid vultures were constantly waiting for gossip and updates. Every single quarrel and family incident was being documented. This sister was taking notes and gathering information all the time. The sister's role as defender and advisor only reinforced my mother's victim narrative and encouraged adversarial rather than collaborative approaches to marital issues. This habit never stopped, no matter how much my dad expressed his displeasure. He felt like he was dealing with 2 women in the family instead of building a partnership with his wife. In their twisted logic, since they couldn't directly confront my dad, they found another target for their revenge: me. After all, I carried his DNA, making me a convenient proxy for their anger. "You should be grateful you were born, as my sister chose your father in a 30 kilometers queue of suitors," my aunt would sneer, as if I should thank their family for my very existence. The constant outside interference had practical consequences too. Because of my mother's constant complaints about how penniless we were constantly receiving their charity, clothes, food, Chinese New Year goodies. Hoarding habits ran in their family. When they found so-called good deals on outlet clothes, they hoarded them. When they ran out of space in their homes, they pushed the excess onto us. My dad, who is extremely particular about home organization, would threaten to throw away the clothes if she didn't wear them. As he put it, "We are not a pigsty for people to dump their rubbish." He refused to eat processed food and made it clear they would throw it all out once Chinese New Year was over, so my dear mother learned to be more selective about what she brought home. But the constant talk of being penniless didn't just affect household decisions. It became the lens through which I experienced childhood. But were we actually poor? We lived in a 2-bedroom public housing flat. My dad was paying the mortgage single-handedly. In my country, 80% of the population live in public housing. That's average family life. While other relatives had dual incomes, most weren't highly educated, and they had 2 kids. We didn't even qualify for subsidies because we weren't that poor. So, why did my mom always complain we were penniless and my dad was a pauper? My dad was highly educated for his generation. Taking the GCE O-level exams in the 1960s was considered high education, especially compared to my mom, who had only grade 2 education. But my dad chose a career with limited opportunities and didn't further his studies. Handling a complaining, victim-minded wife was already a handful. Furthering his career wasn't on his mind when he was unhappy most of the time. My dad always said, being happy is more important than making money. But he was never truly happy. Despite being a caring father and provider, he found himself trapped in a marriage where nothing he did was ever enough. The impact of this toxic environment on me became clear early on. Her financial manipulation started when I was very young. She took every single cent of my ongbao money, the red packets I received during Chinese New Year, until I was 8 years old. Her excuse? She needed to pay back her own red packet expenses since she had to distribute money to other relatives' children. It wasn't until I fought back and said I wanted to start saving my own money, not pay back her debts, that this stopped. Thankfully, my dad supported me on this. But even after that victory, her transactional view of motherhood continued. As young as 7 years old, she constantly reminded me that I needed to pay her back every single cent she spent on me, and this would be determined by how tall I am, stacking up every dollar. I'm relatively tall for an Asian woman, no thanks to her genes. So according to her twisted logic, I apparently owe her quite a fortune. This woman really had the audacity to treat her own child like a business investment with expected returns. This transactional view of motherhood would only get worse as the emotional chaos in our home escalated. The neglect wasn't just financial manipulation, it was physical abandonment too. When I was 8, she took me to a shopping mall with her dearest sister. They were so obsessed with choosing clothes that she didn't even look at me to ensure my safety. Remember, this was the 1990s when parents were still cautious about child safety in public places. I got into an altercation with a stranger's child, and their whole family came seeking revenge on me, 5 versus 1. Thank goodness I wasn't beaten up. My celestial guardian angels must have been looking after me. That was probably the first time I truly felt, maybe it's better to be lost than to be ignored. My dear mom, who had chosen shopping over me, didn't even realize what had happened. Does she have me out of love, or as a retirement ticket? I'm not sure. By the time I was 9, she claimed she was training me to be independent by making me do chores. But she would also complain to her favorite sister that I wasn't independent enough. She did a crappy job herself and expected a 9-year-old to help out? It was more like cleaning up after her, not training to be independent. Being independent was a convenient excuse for her to wash her hands of me. It was only when my dad told her to leave me alone and let me study in peace that she quit it. She never believed in studying anyway. The constant stress at home showed on my face. I had such a constant downward mouth that classmates would always ask me, "Why do you look so angry all the time?" I wasn't angry. I was miserable. But this misery was building towards something far more dangerous. The constant stress, the outside interference, the financial manipulation, it was all creating a powder keg that would eventually explode in the most terrifying way possible. My mother was so emotionally dysregulated, easily agitated even while doing house chores. When I was about 9 years old, this instability reached a terrifying peak. She got so worked up while scolding me that she grabbed a knife and threatened to kill herself. Let me die. I will kill myself. My heart turned cold as I imagined if I was going to see blood. But a voice told me to think logically. The knife was more than 30 centimeters from her face. There was no way she would commit suicide with that distance. I shouted at her, "Stop it. What are you doing?" She put the knife back. A few months later, she did it again. This time, I rolled my eyes and turned away. She never did it again. That inner voice that constantly told me, "Don't feel, think logically, get out of this house with your good studies and get a decent job," became my survival mechanism. It would guide me through even worse situations to come. The chaos escalated further when my parents' fights reached a breaking point. After a huge quarrel between them, she picked up the phone, called her mom, and announced they were getting a divorce. With her mom on the line, she turned to me and said, "Choose your dad or me if we should get a divorce." The same voice that had kept me calm during the knife incident told me, "Don't feel. Don't act. Poker face." I told her, "Neither. I'm better off without both of you." She went back to the phone and told her mom I couldn't choose. But I already knew the answer. Neither of them was the best choice. Them together was the worst choice. Her emotional instability wasn't done forcing me into adult roles. When I was almost 12, after another explosive argument between my parents, she turned to me with the most unrealistic expectation yet. "Why didn't you stop our fighting?" I shot back. "Two adults fighting with each other, and you expect a child to break up your fight? Are you serious?" She fell silent. Complete silence. This shows you just how unrealistic her expectations were, expecting a 12-year-old to manage two grown adults' conflicts. The pattern was clear now. First, she'd threatened self-harm when overwhelmed, then she'd tried to make me choose between parents during their crisis, and finally she expected me to referee their fights. Each time, her emotional instability demanded that I step into roles no child should fill. Even then, I knew something was deeply wrong with that expectation. She often complained I was difficult to take care of. "Look, I am cognitively able. I'm doing all these videos now." I scored well academically, sufficient as in each report book. Well-behaved overall. The only issue? Probably selective mutism. I was miserable listening to the adults quarrel daily. She would complain our household income was low and that she wanted to work part-time, but my dad needed her to take care of me as no other relatives were available. "Dear Mum, I'm your only child. Why do you need an invitation to take care of me? If I'm such trouble, why have me in the first place? I am just a retirement ticket." When I was 13, something happened that gave me the perspective I desperately needed. In Asian culture, it's normal to occasionally consult a spiritual medium to get questions answered. During one of these consultations, the medium told my dad that I was upset about their constant quarreling and was really depressed. Like, wow, such wise words. Which kid isn't unhappy if their parents quarrel daily? But what happened next I remember to this day. My dad consoled me and said something that became my lifeline. "The fight is between both of us. You shouldn't feel burdened if you can't do anything about it. This is our fight, not yours." I held on to this advice until his last day, remembering that children shouldn't be their parents' collateral damage. All this pent-up frustration led me to depression during my teenage years. I became suicidal, but didn't go for treatment. I just couldn't feel happy no matter what I did. I thought scoring well for GCE levels would make me happy. I scored 8 for L1 or 5, but I wasn't. From ages 16 to 18, that single inner voice I'd relied on for survival split into two competing forces. One telling me to take the lift to the 10th floor and jump. Our 4th floor apartment wouldn't guarantee death. Another telling me to live another day. Somehow, I survived till today. My guardian angels must have been really busy trying to convince me not to jump daily. That period was a blur. I cannot recall how I even survived through. Every single time my maternal aunt hurled insults at me, I made a silent promise. I will get out of this house when I'm of age, even if it means going to a monastery to escape this family. The truth I finally see. To be honest, I even fell for my mom's victim mindset tricks back then, always blaming my dad for his bad temper and fussiness, feeling bad for my mother, trying to tolerate my aunt's insults. Looking back, he truly loved me. He thought tolerating all this nonsense would bring peace to the family, but he had unknowingly buried a ticking time bomb for his health. People ask why I'm voicing out now. Because I found my strength and my voice. Confronting these memories is the only way to know the past is the past, and these are just illusions now. I want my dad to know I have finally opened my eyes and see the truth now. So when we meet again in the afterlife, I can face him with a clear conscience. To anyone listening, if you grew up feeling invisible, unloved, or blamed, your past shaped you, but it doesn't define you. You are not broken. You are still here. And that is your victory.